Soldiers like Private Ace Levy and Lieutenant John Rico. Come on, you ape! You want to live forever!
Well, maybe not forever, but at least to see like 40. Hi, I'm Mike Siegel. I'm an astrophysicist. I write for Ordinary Times, and this is The Throughput. So I'm working on a big video now, but it's kind of stuck in editing hell right now. It will come out in a couple weeks. But today I woke up to find that there was this big discussion online about the movie Starship Troopers. And I had lots of opinions, as you might have imagined. And I wrote a few responses, then I was like, hell with it, I'm going to make a video. I have a YouTube channel for this. So I am right here. I am a big fan of Robert A. Heinlein and the novel Starship Troopers, which of course won the Hugo in 1959. The movie I'm kind of mixed on. Has been kind of an interesting history to watch. When it came out, it was kind of unpopular and was derided by critics, and a lot of people said it was kind of a fascist movie. And over time, people have seen it as being more satirical, and its reputation has improved. I'm still kind of in the middle. I think there are good parts of it and bad parts of it, but we'll discuss that. Usually when I do a reaction video, you're seeing an end of a process. I am familiar with the movie. I'll look up some stuff about the movie. I've been thinking about it for a few weeks. And then I'll watch the movie while taking notes, do some research to make sure that I'm addressing the issues properly, write a script, read the script, throw out the script, and then do a reaction where you're getting a little bit of a live reaction, but mostly stuff I've thought about and am explaining based on having watched the movie before. I do that because that kind of spontaneous reaction is not something I'm good at. You know, these videos that people have are reactions where they're like, oh my God, and oh, I can't believe that, and run, Forrest, run. I appreciate those videos. I like watching them. I could not do them because I just, that's not the way I'm wired. I don't have that kind of spontaneity and reaction in me. I have to think about things. And the one thing I've learned about YouTube is that you really can't fake the funk. You have to be giving something genuine. And what you're seeing when I react to these things is genuine. I've thought about it. I've done some research. I'm trying to explain the scientific concepts involved and give you a little bit of a reaction of how I feel about the movie. This one I haven't watched in a very long time, probably 20 years. And so I didn't plan to watch this until today. So you're going to see way more of a raw reaction from me than you're usually used to getting. And hopefully let me know in the comments if that works for you. And maybe I'll do this a little bit more spontaneously in the future. So this is sort of kicking off the next few episodes of this channel, which is going to deal with human beings encountering aliens. And sometimes in a war setting, as it is in this movie and one of the other ones we'll discuss, and sometimes in a more peaceful setting. And so we're going to do this movie. I am keeping the other ones as secret right now for what we will be discussing, but that's going to be the theme for the next few episodes. And so it's kind of weird to start it here because this is one of the sillier movies dealing with human-alien interactions, but it deals with a lot of cliches and a lot of issues, so it's kind of fun to talk about.
But this time, we're ready. Planetary defenses are better than ever.
No, we've talked about this in many videos before. You don't just blow up the asteroid. You have to deflect it because the energy's still there. Heinlein would not approve of this.
Source of the bug meteor attacks orbits a twin star system whose brutal gravitational forces produce an unlimited supply of bug meteorites in the form of this asteroid belt.
The Kalandathu system is a binary star system. That's cool. It has a lot of asteroids. You might get that in a binary system because orbits can be unstable and you could have planets, I don't know, not forming at all. But why would you take asteroids and send them light years away instead of just going to Earth and using our asteroid belt for this? Seems like kind of a huge waste of resources there. So we'll just get this out of the way. This is supposed to be set in the future when we have faster than light ships and all that sort of thing. And the tactics being used here are terrible. These would be tactics that would be obsolete in the 20th century, let alone the 27th or whatever they're dealing with here. In the book, of course, they use mech suits. Like we saw in Aliens, where you have a suit that they wear that has missiles and very powerful guns on it. And so it enables the humans to go toe-to-toe with the pseudo-arachnids. They decided to drop that for the movie. I remember at the time they said, well, that's a cliche. But actually the reason they didn't do it was because it would be horrendously expensive. It was difficult enough to have Sigourney Weaver in a mech suit for Aliens for part of the movie. You can imagine trying to do this with dozens or hundreds of extras and how bad that would be. I think actually you could probably do it now. Some combination of practical and CG effects. Robotics has come a long way since then. So you could maybe, if you redid this now, do it. But just going up and shooting at point blank range, we engage targets from hundreds of yards now with our current weapons. And we can use armor piercing rounds and explosive rounds and all kinds of things to, take out people who are wearing Kevlar and so forth. So this business of they're just wildly blazing away at the bugs and not making any dent really does not go well. If you were going for a straight up adaptation, that would go for it. If you're going for this sort of satirical adaptation where they don't care how many people get killed, maybe that works a little better. In addition to reading the book, I looked around and I couldn't find it. I could swear I had it. Maybe one of my kids ate it or something. I had a Starship Troopers board game from the 1970s. I think I bought it in a bookstore just randomly. It was actually not a bad game. It was very complicated, though. And I think it's the sort of thing that if you did it now as a computer game would actually be really cool.
This year we explored the failure of democracy, while the social scientists brought our world to the brink of chaos. We talked about the veterans, how they took control and imposed the stability that has lasted for generations since. When you vote, you are exercising political authority. You're using force. And force, my friends, is violence. The supreme authority from which all other authority is derived.
I generally try to avoid politics on this channel because it's not really my bailiwick. I do write about them other places, but I'd like to stick to science here. But it's almost impossible to discuss Starship Troopers without getting into the politics of Starship Troopers and the politics surrounding it. The society that Heinlein depicts is one where you do not get an automatic right to vote, and it's very skeptical of direct democracy. In the novel and in the movie, the franchise is earned through public service, and specifically what we see in both is military service. Now in Expanded Universe, which was written 20 years after Starship Troopers, Heinlein addressed a lot of the criticisms people had of the book, a lot of the points they raised, and pushed back against a lot of the things that people attributed to them. And that one of the things he says in that book is that public service does not necessarily have to be in the military. It can be teaching or some other public service, and also clarifies that you don't get the right to vote till after you've left public service. Once you're a veteran and have retired from public service, then you get the right to vote. I think that's actually a bit of retconning. I did peruse the book a bit in preparation for this, specifically to the points where Johnny is being recruited and talking about the franchise, and it's pretty clear that military service is what they're talking about. So I think Heinlein was a bit retconning there. One of the things people misunderstand about Heinlein is a lot of the times he's not actually endorsing ideas, he's exploring them. He likes to take ideas and turn what we think on our head and see if the biases and beliefs we have are rational or irrational. He did that as time went on more with sex and relationships and so forth. And in this one, he does it more with politics. And so in Expanded Universe, he goes on this on a lot more detail that, he's pushing back on the idea that the right to vote should just be given to you when you're 18, that you should do something to earn that. Now, in 1959, that was coming in a context. We had come out of a long period where women were not allowed to vote. We were in the middle of the civil rights action, was trying to get black people the right to vote and to actually vote rather than being barred for stupid reasons and by people who had enormous power over them. But that wasn't what Heinlein was talking about. He throws out in an Expanded Universe a number of different ideas you could have as opposed to universal franchise. One of those is to forbid men from voting, because he said, well, we tried it with just men voting. Why don't we try it with just women voting and see how things go? So this is another example of him just throwing out ideas and people saying, oh, he's a fascist. He wants this authoritarian government. Not necessarily. He's throwing out these ideas to see what other societies might look like, what other ideas might look like, and to cause us to critically examine the assumptions we make of getting the automatic franchise when you're 18, not having to do anything to qualify for a vote. So I always caution people, be very careful about reading politics into Heinlein. He made when he wants to write politics, he writes it pretty straightforward. He was an ardent anti-communist. He was an ardent Cold Warrior. Starship Troopers was written because he opposed the nuclear test ban and believed that we needed to have a very strong nuclear arsenal if we were to keep the Soviet Union at bay. He writes lots of nonfiction where he's clear on where his politics lie. Now, the society in Starship Troopers has been described as fascist. I don't quite see it that way because the racial aspects are not there, especially in the book, where this is taking place in Buenos Aires, so all the people are Argentine, except for Juan Rico, who is Filipino and speaks in Tagalog as well as English. In fact, the book is actually more racially diverse than the movie was 40 years later. So that aspect of racism isn't really present in there, except against the bugs, which is something we'll get into a little bit later. The militarism of the society, that's a valid criticism. But as Heinlein wrote, he was glorifying the military because he served in it for a long time, and he believed that the military was a noble pursuit and that wars have to be fought. And again, pushing ideas and seeing what the results are rather than endorsing them. One of the interesting things about this, though, is his book is very traditional in its approach to military issues. You have officers, you have sergeants, you have this line of command and discipline and so forth. Well, there was another book written a few years later that people said was a response to Starship Troopers that is very different in its approach to the subject, where discipline is frowned upon, rejects a lot of military traditions, and that is The Forever War by Joe Haldeman. The Forever War, a lot of people said it was a response to Starship Troopers. Haldeman himself said it really wasn't. He said it drew some inspiration for it, but was more based on his experiences in Vietnam. And there's a really interesting story where they were going to meet at a convention, and a lot of people were saying, oh, Heinlein's going to rip Haldeman. He's going to hate him because Heinlein's such a fascist, and Haldeman wrote this from a much more liberal point of view. And apparently, Spider Robinson relates the story that Heinlein came up to Haldeman, shook his hand, and said, "Did you write The Forever War? That's one of the best future war novels I've ever read." And Haldeman wrote later on Heinlein's death that Heinlein sent him a very nice letter congratulating him when he won the Nebula Award and telling him how much he loved the book. And Haldeman said that meant more to him than the award. So again, ideas. That was what he was interested in. And the Forever War is also a very good book. They've actually never done an adaptation to it, which I'm surprised because it deals with a lot of really cool issues like time dilation and so forth. And its take on the human-alien war is very different than what we get in Starship Troopers. And I really recommend reading both books because both books are good and good books should be read. Everyone in this movie is so good looking. Was genetic engineering invented?
A murderer was captured this morning and tried today.
Guilty.
Sentence, death. Execution tonight at 6. All net, all channels.
These commercials are, I think, much more effective at conveying the satire and the sort of fascistic aspects of this society, where you have this propaganda machine, and especially they show in just this clip, the idea that someone would be tried and executed in a very short time for a crime that they supposedly committed. So I think that's one of the things that drives this movie quite well.
Would you like to know more?
Anytime you think I'm being too tough, anytime you think I'm being unfair, anytime you miss your mommy, quit! Do something for 1248, you grab your gear, you take a stroll down Washout Lane. Do you get me?
So now this is one of the things that's very interesting about both the book and the movie. And when people say it's a fascist society, there is no draft. There is no involuntary servitude. Everyone has to volunteer, and they can quit unless they're in the middle of a combat action or something like that. Heinlein talks about this in the Expanded Universe, how he is vehemently opposed to the draft, how he thinks that any country that needs a draft in order to fight a war is doomed. And he points out that the wars from his perspective, the wars we fought where we needed a draft to get enough people to fight, Vietnam and Korea in particular, were problems, whereas with World War I and World War II, we had a draft, but it was more of an organizational tool. We had plenty of volunteers. And of course, now we are in an all-volunteer force. There are a lot of people, and especially from far ideologies, who think that we should reinstitute the draft. And this is one of the things I do like about that they brought into the movie that I think puts a pin in that idea that this is a completely fascist society, that these are volunteers. No one is drafted, no one serves against their will. And I think that's a very interesting point.
Breckenridge, what's your excuse?
Oh, my family's all farmers. I hate farming. I mean, Mobile Infantry is like pure picnic by comparison.
All right, so they grow them big and dumb on the farm planet, huh? And pretty.
I like big.
So one of the things that's interesting difference between the book and the movie, in the book, the Mobile Infantry are an entirely male force. In the movie, they're a mixed gender force. I think that's a change Heinlein would have been okay with. In 1959, the idea of women troopers and infantry especially would not have been received terribly well, but later on he showed much more gender diversity in roles, and so I think he would have been okay with this.
Food's pretty tough. Sometimes I think I won't make it, but then I think about what you're doing and I try hard. Who knows? They might even make me squad leader. Uh-oh.
One of the many great things about the movie and the book is most science fiction, when they deal with military, deal with officers. Star Trek, Babylon 5, everyone's a captain or a lieutenant or whatever. Whereas the book very specifically deals with the common soldier, the infantry, the guy who, as Heinlein said, puts his body between homeland and war's desolation. And the most advanced person you're going to meet in the book and the movie is a lieutenant. Most of them are privates or corporals or sergeants. And I do think that gives a very different tone, and I think it's a much improved tone against other military novels, that you are focusing on the common soldier, not on the people who do the strategic planning. Most science fiction writers, myself included, are well educated, and so they sympathize more with the officer types, with the high level strategy, with that sort of middle management and management types thing, rather than the sort of more blue collar representation of the infantry. So I think having this representation is a really nice contrast against what we generally see in science fiction, particularly science fiction on television or movies.
How come you're in such a good mood, huh? Because today I get to fly that.
Now in the novel, I believe the pilots are an all-female force because Heinlein was saying that women could take higher G forces than men could without passing out. I don't know if that's actually true. I'll put a little blurb under my face if it is true or not true. But that was one of the differences with the novel and the movie.
Don't exceed port speed,
Or what?
or they revoke your flight status. And mine.
Your career's in my hands.
Oh, that's interesting. I never noticed that before. It looks like that what they have is an equatorial ring around the moon. These would actually be interesting structures if you had the resources to create them. Where in some of Arthur C. Clarke's novels, he had the idea that you would have an equatorial ring around the Earth, and then you'd use space elevators to get into space. Such a structure would be stable and would be a really great place to launch spaceships from and so forth. So they've apparently put one up around the moon. That'd be a little easier to construct if you were using resources on the moon, because there's less of a gravity well to push things up into. And so you could have construction yards, you could have ship ports, you could have all kinds of things there. So that's actually an interesting touch that I don't think is in the book, if I recall.
I couldn't have done it without you, Biz. Friends? Thanks.
So Diz in the novels, of course, is a man because it's an all-male mobile infantry and is kind of a minor character. So the character that they expanded and changed into for the movie is a very different character. Obviously woman. She has this crush on Johnny that eventually culminates in them getting together and all, for a brief period, and then unfortunately is killed. And probably the saddest part of the movie. As someone who loves the novel, I love what they did with this character. I love how Dina Meyer plays it. She's absolutely fantastic and beautiful and charming. And I can't really see why Johnny is hanging around for Carmen when he has her available. So count me in with Michael Ironside's character of don't pass up a good thing. I think they just really did a great job with this. Really one of the few places where the movie, I think, knocked it out of the park compared to the book. I think the cool thing about Dizzy is she's exactly the kind of female character that Robert Heinlein often created, sometimes to the point of cliche. She's tough, she's smart, she's sassy, she's warm, she's confident, and she's feminine, and she's redheaded, of course. I seem to have lost my train of thought there.
We love you, son.
Oh no, what's that?
It's like rain.
This time of year?
Sure is dark.
Your transmission has been terminated due to...
So this is when Buenos Aires is destroyed by an asteroid. Asteroid warfare, as we've talked about the danger of asteroids hitting the Earth, and so being able to drop an asteroid in out of warp drive and drop them in, or as I said earlier, being able to redirect asteroids from the asteroid belt would be a very effective way of warfare, especially if you're of genocidal intent. It wouldn't actually happen like this. It would be very sudden and dramatic. You'd just see probably the transmission cut off. You wouldn't see, oh, what's that in the sky? So a little bit of dramatic license there, but an absolutely effective weapon of war would be dropping things from orbit. So this also addresses a part of the movie I was asking questions about earlier, that if you were to push asteroids from the asteroid belt, there would be time enough for humans to maybe divert them. Whereas if you're dropping them out of space right in front of the planet, there's basically nothing you could do to defend against them.
Hey, you take that stroll down Washout Lane. You're only proving one thing, Johnny.
What's that, Diz?
That you don't have what it takes to be a citizen.
God, I love the character of Diz. She's so good. She's really, I think, the best part of the movie.
Nothing lives in what was once called the Latin paradise.
Oh, Johnny, it's us.
Buenos Aires has been wiped off the earth.
If anything, this understates the devastation you would have. This would be the equivalent of thousands of nuclear weapons going off. You would have a massive cloud. It would have been a shockwave felt around the globe. They would have probably felt it shaking there. I mean, this would have been a devastating event. And the movie, I think, does a reasonable job portraying how devastating it is. But I think even that, it's way understating just how awful this would be and how much it would easily motivate humans to get into a genocidal war. Online, there's been some speculation that, it was a false flag and so forth. I don't buy that. People get obsessed with the kind of false flag theories. I actually wrote an article, which I'll link in the description, about how rare false flag operations are because it's basically almost impossible to keep it a secret. So I'll just take this both in the book and in the movie as at face value.
Everyone's doing their part. Are you?
Why are you?
The war effort needs your effort. At work, at home, in your community.
Why are you stomping roaches? These are pseudo-arachnids. They're not...
We are going in with the first wave. These more bugs for us to kill. You smash the entire area. You kill anything that has more than 2 legs. You get me? We get you, son.
Another reason the tactics in this movie don't make any sense is the arachnids are a lot. They have enormous numbers, and you have to have a human who can destroy many bugs before he is killed in order to make level the playing field. And so having these mass attacks where humans are getting killed left, right, and center, I mean, yeah, cannon fodder, blah, blah, blah. Authoritarian societies don't care about the individual, but just on a tactical level, you're losing. So, spoiler warning, the video I'm making has something to do with movie scores, and this one actually has a pretty good one. So I don't particularly care for the way this is done with the soldiers mass attacking arachnids and all this stuff. I think that the way the book does it, where you have these platoons drop and all this stuff, is much better done. But I do like the idea, both in the book and the movie, that the humans commit a major, major tactical error. One of the things that you'll see in Space Wars is, they have these lines of territory and so forth. But stars there's lots of light years between them. There's nothing in principle, if you can go faster than the speed of light or jump to warp drive or hyperspace or whatever, to prevent you from just peering over the enemy's home planet and attacking it. And that's what the humans decide to do. They decide to go after Klendathu, knock that out, and you've won the war. And it turns out to be a horrific mistake because they don't understand their enemy. They don't understand the tactics they're dealing with. And so they have to then regroup and go back to a much more careful, systematic destruction of the Arachnid Empire that gradually pushes them back, takes over their planets, gathers intelligence, produces improved tactics, improved weaponry, so that they can win the war. So the way this is portrayed in the movie, I think, is a little bit over the top, but I like the idea of this, that yes, you can attack the enemy's home planet right away. There's nothing stopping you if you can travel faster than light. There's light years between planets, but it turns out to be a huge tactical error. You need to be more systematic. There is actually a historical parallel here from the war in the Pacific to the American invasion of Tarawa. We were unprepared for how fierce and unrelenting the Japanese resistance would be. And the result was a very bloody battle, much bloodier than the American public anticipated. And the images of American soldiers dead on the beaches was shocking to the American public. And this montage of dead soldiers on Klendathu is very reminiscent of that.
Rico, you once asked me for advice. Want some now?
Yes, sir. Lieutenant, HQ's on the com.
Never pass up a good thing.
Most scientifically accurate part of the movie. Good advice.
Moving out, there's been a distress call from General Owen on Planet B, so get your wired and report in 10 minutes.
Yes, sir.
Who's that with you?
Florence, sir.
Make it 20 minutes.
Yes, sir.
I really love that part of the movie. I mean, granted, it sets up what's about to follow, but it's really cute and I think well done.
Dirty bugs came in right while they were having chow. Ugh.
Yeah, this is where they got in.
So this is something that I think is very in keeping with the pseudo-arachnid strategy and with the board game and with other ways that they've been portrayed, that you have this big defensive thing and they just come right out from under you. Another thing where the humans are thinking like humans and not thinking like bugs. And so it's a subtle thing, but I really like how it's feeding the through line that humans, when they encounter alien species, need to think like that alien species or they're going to lose.
They sucked his brains out.
Now, I'm not sure why they do that. It's later explained that they're doing this to gain the knowledge of the human, but literally sucking someone's brain out is not going to do that to you. The brain is very complex. It stores information in a way that is not like a computer, not like a mechanism. If you just pull someone's brains out, you're not being able to get information from that. The only person who can pull information from a human brain is the human himself. Every human brain stores information differently, processes information differently. This is why even if you had the technology, interrogation is going to work a lot better than sucking someone's brains out. So makes it for a dramatic part of the movie. It is not in the novel, actually. But really, this is one of the things where I think the movie diverged from the novel poorly, and that this is a really bad way of getting information, especially when the bugs have many horrific ways of torturing people if they wanted to get information out of them. Yeah, that's probably the saddest part of the movie. And one of the problems with making a character you care about is what happens when they die. I actually, one of the times I watched this movie, that night I had a dream where she like survived and so forth. I think I must have watched it way too late or something like that. So Dizzy is more of a minor character in the books, but the way he dies in the books is on the way up from an operation, so this is a little touch to the book.
Johnny, I'm sorry it had to be your unit on P. That mission had a very low survival probability.
The bugs laid a trap for us, didn't they?
Elegant proof of intelligence, isn't it? I thought there might be a brain bug on P.
You knew and you sent them anyway?
We couldn't afford to launch an operation if there wasn't one. You don't approve? Well, too bad. We're in this for the species, boys and girls. It's simple numbers. They have more. And every day I have to make decisions that send hundreds of people like you to their deaths.
Didn't they tell you, Colonel? That's what the Mobile Infantry's good for.
And this is supposed to have sort of fascistic overtones, but I don't care what government you're in, these decisions have to be made in war. You know, there's the infamous decision that Churchill made to not let Coventry know that a bombing attack was happening because that would let the Nazis know that we'd broken their code and we could read their communications. And these sort of decisions are the ones that have to be made on a strategic level. So this actually isn't in the book. In the book, it's sort of more of an straightforward operation to capture the brain bug. As much as the uniforms and the commentary and so forth say, oh, fascist government, this is a decision any military would make to confirm the presence of a brain bug and to capture it so that they may gain an intelligence advantage over the enemy. I do kind of like that this scene shows people getting sucked out of the sides of ships, shows the decks being open like that, shows bodies in space, which you don't often see. I do think that that portrayal of how brutal space battle might be is something that's kind of unusual to see in science fiction. This movie is rated R, and it earns it. There's, a small amount of nudity, but that actually doesn't bother me. But it is very gory and violent, and so I think in some ways that actually serves the purpose of the movie that it's making, to not sugarcoat what's going on. In most science fiction movies, someone gets shot with a blaster, they fall down. There's no blood or anything. This shows a really gruesome a model of warfare, which is probably much more accurate to what a war would actually be like, including in space, where things are usually very clinical and ships blow up and so forth like that. And then there's no debris left and so forth. This shows a debris field, shows bodies, shows suffering. And I think for what the movie is doing, I think it's very appropriate. Again, it's a pretty gruesome scene, which is why I'm not showing it. But sucking someone's brains out is not going, and unless the brain bug considered as a delicacy or something like that, it's not going to give them knowledge, because the human brain has very specific structures that hold knowledge, very specific ways it is put together to access that knowledge. It is very individualized to the individual human, and if you commit that kind of trauma and just scramble up their brains like that, all that information is lost. So Very dramatic scene, but nah. Oh no, not running explosions! Whew, need another break there. This chair is comfortable, but sitting here for 2 hours at age 51 can be a little bit of a burden on the knees. So overall, this movie is way better than I remember it being. I remember it being kind of an entertaining movie and kind of dopey and so forth, but it's actually really good and has aged pretty well. I think the movie does a really good job of having those elements that satirize fascism, especially when you talk about the uniforms and the propaganda videos and stuff like that. But you don't have to see that if you don't want to. You can just enjoy it as an outer space adventure with a lot of pretty people shooting bugs. And it works that way. I mean, the cast, no one's going to mistake these guys for Oscar winners, but they're all really good at what they do. I mean, Michael Ironside, I'd watch him in just about anything. He's an awesome, tough guy. But as I said, Dina Mayer's great. Casper Van Dien, as I've gotten older, I've developed more appreciation for how difficult it is to play a straight arrow like that, and he plays it pretty well. And Denise Richards always gets a lot of criticism for acting, but I think she does a fine job as Carmen. And the supporting cast is quite good, and all around, I didn't see anyone who I said, oh boy, they're really bad in this movie. Everyone's pretty good. And I attribute a lot of that to Verhoeven. He's a very good director of actors and tends to get good performances out of his cast, and especially gets the performances he wants out of his cast that suit the kind of movie he's making. The special effects have aged remarkably well. It doesn't look as clunky as you would think for a 25-year-old movie. As for the politics, look, people, including myself, have a tendency to throw around the word fascism far too loosely. The book, I think the criticisms are unwarranted. Yes, you have to earn franchise. And yes, it glorifies the military. But this is a society that is racially mixed. This is a society that clearly has a lot of personal freedom in terms of speech and religion and things like that. As I noted, it is an all-volunteer force, which carries a lot of weight for me in terms of how authoritarian a society is or is not. And so I think that people's reaction to this book when it was published in 1959 was a little bit of an overreaction and continues to be a bit of an overreaction. That I think people mistake Heinlein glorifying the military, and especially the grunt military, the soldiers who fight in the trenches and aren't in the, we don't usually see movies made about. I think that rubbed a lot of people the wrong way, and that's why they've reacted to it the way they did. The movie is a little more overt, pushes it a little more into the satirical category of having the uniforms and the language and the way this genocidal war is depicted as being more in a fascistic direction. You could see it in many ways as a commentary on the book itself, that, okay, you posited this society, but this society could easily tip over into an authoritarian society. So that's the way I sort of look at the politics of this book. But one of the interesting things is, with the discussion that broke out this weekend over the politics of the book, was how many diverse points of view I saw. Some people saw it as the thrashings of a failed empire. Other people saw it as a warning about fascism. Other people tried to tie it to what's going on in Ukraine or Palestine right now. And I think that Robert Heinlein would be delighted that 65 years after he published this book, it's still provoking this kind of passionate and vivid discussion. And so that's really the mark of a good book and a good story, that it can have that kind of impact after so long. As for the science, there's not really a lot to talk about. You have faster than light travel. You have bugs shooting plasma into space. I do like that they show that space warfare can be brutal and can be bloody, and there can be bodies and debris everywhere, which would actually be the case. I do like that they show that you could attack the enemy's home planet right away. There's nothing stopping you because planets are very far between, but it's probably a bad idea to do so. More especially, and leading into the theme that's going to be showing up in my next few videos, is how it shows that interaction between human and alien. There are various ways this has been depicted in fiction, both on the written page and on the silver screen. And this is probably the most stark in showing where the humans and the pseudo-arachnids cannot meaningfully communicate, are apparently uninterested in meaningfully communicated, and this quickly becomes a genocidal war to the death. There's another book, the movie that comments on that, which is Ender's Game. I might add that to the list. It's not in it right now, but I might add that to the list as I go on. But that sort of takes it in a little different direction. But it is one of the possibilities that may exist if we ever contact alien life. We may not be able to communicate with them. We may find ourselves in a situation where we have to fight to survive. That is the story of evolution, of species fighting to survive. And I would like to think that a species that is intelligent enough to get into space, that is intelligent enough to colonize planets, that is intelligent enough to build spaceships, would be intelligent enough to communicate peacefully, to want to make peace with its neighbors, to want to get along. But it is a possibility that that may not be the case, at least not with every race that we encounter. And so this represents kind of the extreme end of how humans might interact with aliens. And as we go on through this series, we'll see different takes on this. And so that should be a lot of fun. So overall rating, minus points for the aggressively silly infantry tactics and for the brain-sucking sequence and the usual faster-than-light travel, spaceships making U-turns, that sort of thing. Plus points for showing that you can attack an enemy's homeworld right away, but probably not a good idea. And for showing kind of the extreme end of what a human-alien interaction might look like. So I'd probably give this 3 face palms. Maybe if they'd stuck with the mech suits and cut out the brain-sucking sequence, it would be 2. So this was a fun movie to revisit after so long. My opinion of it is significantly better than it was going in, because I really think it works quite well and is made very well. So as we go on, we'll continue to discuss this idea of what's going to happen if and when humans ever meet other intelligent species. But until we get to there, I'm Mike Siegel. I write for Ordinary Times. Thank you for watching.